Hello, friends, and welcome to Adventures in Pixingon. My name's Amy. I'm an ordained minister, and we are in Bible study. We are in the NIV, and we will be through the end of 2025. In this video, we are in Leviticus chapter 25. It's a long chapter. It goes through 1 through 55. So we're going to jump in because we're doing the whole chapter, just like we always do. The Sabbath year. The Lord said to Moses on Mount Sinai, "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, when you enter the land I am going to give you, the land itself must observe the Sabbath to the Lord. For 6 years sow your fields, and for 6 years prune your vineyards and gather your crops. But in the 7th year, the land is to have a Sabbath of rest, a Sabbath to the Lord." So no planting. Do not sow your fields or prune your vineyards. Do not reap what grows of itself or harvest the grapes of your untended vines. The land is to have a year of rest. Whatever the land yields during the Sabbath year will be food for you, for yourselves, your manservants and maidservants, and your hired worker and your temporary resident who live among you, as well as your livestock and wild animals. Whatever the land produces may be eaten. So you can't plant anything new, but you can eat from what you've planted every 7th year of that. So just no planting anything new. And that's to allow the soil to recoup. You'll get better crops with healthy soil. That's also why people who are professional farmers tend to rotate their crops. That would be the other way we do that. Okay. The year of the Jubilee. Count off 7 Sabbath of years, 7 times 7, so that the 7th Sabbath of years amounts to the period of 49 years. Okay. Then have the trumpet sounded everywhere on the 10th day of the 7th month, on the Day of Atonement. Sound the trumpet throughout your land. Consecrate the 50th year and proclaim liberty throughout the land to all its inhabitants. It shall be a jubilee for you. Each one of you is to return his family property, and each to his own clan. Meaning that if you had bought property from somebody who was in like a different part from where your family clan was, on the 50th year you had to give it back to that family. Even if you bought it, tended to it, did all that stuff, you have to give it back. The 50th year shall be a jubilee for you. Do not sow and do not reap what grows of itself or harvest the untended vine. So in year 49 you can, but in year 50 you cannot. For it is a jubilee, and it is to be holy for you. Eat only what is taken directly from the fields. So no vines, but the fields. Anything that might be growing wild, or anything that continues to grow even though you didn't plant last year. You can eat that. In this year of Jubilee, everyone is to return to his own property. We all have to go home. If you sell land to one of your countrymen or buy any from him, do not take advantage of each other. Okay? You are to buy from your countrymen on the basis of the number of years since Jubilee, and he is to sell to you on the basis of the numbers of years left for harvesting crops. So meaning if they know it's year like 48 and a half, they can't charge you the full price for the field. They can only charge you for the 6 months of sowing or the year and 6 months. Because in year 50, you no longer have a lease with them. So they can't charge you like what it would be for the long term. And they go, "Oh, sorry, you gave me all that money, but it was actually only a 6 months year. Haha, you didn't know it." When the years are many, you are to increase the price. And when the years are few, you are to decrease the price. because what he is really selling you is a number of crops. So essentially, you didn't really own the land. You are leasing it. Do not take advantage of each other, but fear your God. I am the Lord, your God. Follow my decrees and be careful to obey my laws, and you will live safely in the land. Then the land will yield its fruit, and you will eat your fill and live there in safety. You may ask, what will we eat in the 7th year if we do not plant or harvest our crops? I will send you such a blessing in the 6th year that the land will yield enough for 3 years. So he'll take care of you. While you plant during the 8th year, you will eat from the old crop, and you will continue to eat until the harvest of the 9th year comes in. So he's like, I got you. We're going to produce a lot in these other years. The land must not be sold permanently, because the land is mine, and you are but aliens and my tenants. So, I mean, he made the planet. God doesn't need us, and Mother Earth doesn't need us. We need her and him. Okay? Throughout the country that you hold as a possession, you must provide for the redemption of the land. If one of your countrymen becomes poor and sells some of his property, his nearest relative is to come and redeem what his countryman is sold. If, however, a man has no one to redeem it for him, but he himself prospers and acquires sufficient means to redeem it, he is determined to determine the value for the years since he sold it, and refund the balance to the man to whom he sold it. Then he can go back to his own property. But if he does not acquire the means to repay him, what he sold will remain in the possession of the buyer until the year of Jubilee, in which case it'll go back to the family. It will be returned in the Jubilee, and then he can go back to his property. So if you sell it minimally at 50 years, you're going to get back. If a man sells a house in a walled city, he retains the right of redemption a full year after its sale. During that time, he may redeem it. If it is not redeemed before the full year has passed, the house in the walled city shall belong permanently to the buyer and his descendants. It is not to be returned in the Jubilee. Okay, so this only includes fields and things outside city walls. But houses in villages without walls around them are to be considered as open country. They can be redeemed, and they are to be returned in Jubilee. The Levites always have the right to redeem their houses in the Levitical towns which they possess. So the property of the Levites is redeemable, that is, a house sold in any town they hold, and is to be returned in the Jubilee, because the houses in the towns of the Levites are their property among the Israelites. But the pasture land belonging to the towns must not be sold. It is their permanent possession. If one of your countrymen becomes poor and is unable to support himself among you, help him as you would an alien or a temporary resident, so he can continue to live among you. Like that, help him. And you're like, but what do you mean it's an alien or a temporary resident? Like, hospitality was expected. Do not take interest of any kind from him. The kind is, I got a footnote of A. Or excessive interest. Or take excessive interest of him, okay? But fear your God, so that your countrymen may continue to live among you. You must not lend him money at interest or sell him food at a profit. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt to give you the land of Canaan and to be your God. If one of your countrymen becomes poor among you and sells himself to you, Do not make him work as a slave. He is to be treated as a hired worker or a temporary resident among you. He is to work for you until the year of Jubilee. Then he and his children are to be released, and he will go back to his own clan and to his property of his forefathers. Because the Israelites are my servants, whom I brought out of Egypt. They must not be sold as slaves. Do not rule over them. There we go. Do not rule over them ruthlessly, to fear your God. Your male and female slaves are to come from the nations around you, and from them you may buy slaves. You may also buy some of the temporary residents among you and members of their clans born in your country, and they will become your property. So I don't like that at all. You can will them to your children as inherited property and can make them slaves for life. I don't like that. But if you must rule over your fellow, but you must not rule over your fellow Israelites ruthlessly. I say don't rule over anybody ruthlessly, but I'm all for not having slaves. If any alien or a temporary resident among you becomes rich, and one of your countrymen becomes poor and sells himself to the alien living among you or to a member of the alien's clan, he retains the right of redemption after he has sold himself. One of his relatives may redeem him. An uncle or a cousin or any blood relative in his clan may redeem him. Or if he prospers, he may redeem himself. He and his buyer are to count the time from the year he sold himself up to the year of Jubilee. The price for his release is to be based on the rate paid for a hired man for that number of years. If many years remain, he must pay for his redemption a larger share of the price paid for him. If only a few years remain until the year of Jubilee, then he is to compute that and pay for his redemption accordingly. He is to be treated as a man hired from year to year. You must see to it that his owner does not rule over him ruthlessly. So they expected them to get involved, the priests. Even if he is not redeemed in any of these ways, he and his children are to be released in the year of Jubilee. For the Israelites belong to me as servants. They are my servants whom I brought out of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. Well, obviously you got to hear from me the parts I didn't like. But again, long ago, different people, the concept of living in a world with absolutely no slavery back in the BC era. We couldn't even get to it in the AD era until sort of like, I'm not even sure there's people, I'm pretty sure there are people who are not over the fact that they can't own slaves like today, let alone, back thousands and thousands of years ago. 3,000 years ago? Yeah, it sucks. I'm sorry anybody was ever a slave. It's terrible. I'm glad that we're in a place where that's just the thing that we all look at now, or most of us look at now and go, no. Bad human.